When my dad remarried after mom's death, I thought our family was finally healing. But when his new wife, Jessica, cornered me in the kitchen one evening and said, "It's time you choose. Either I'm your mother now or you can find somewhere else to live," I never expected what happened next. Because when Dad walked in and heard those words, his response left everyone speechless. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I was 16 when everything changed. My name is Olivia Richardson, and up until that summer evening in Denver, I thought I knew exactly what my life looked like. My mom, Sarah, had passed away 3 years earlier from cancer, leaving just Dad and me to figure out how to keep going. Those first 2 years were rough, really rough. Dad threw himself into his accounting firm, working late nights and weekends while I learned how to do laundry, cook basic meals, and pretend I wasn't falling apart inside. Then Jessica Martinez walked into our lives. She was Dad's new client first, a successful real estate agent who needed help organizing her finances after a messy divorce. I remember the first time Dad mentioned her at dinner, how his whole face seemed to light up when he talked about this incredibly organized woman who brought homemade cookies to their meetings. At first, I was happy for him. Dad deserved to smile again. Their relationship moved fast. Within 6 months, Jessica was joining us for dinner twice a week. Within 8 months, she was staying over on weekends. By the 1-year mark, Dad sat me down at our kitchen table, the same table where Mom used to help me with homework, and told me he was going to propose. "I want you to be okay with this, Liv," he said, using the nickname only my parents ever called me. "Jessica makes me happy, but you're the most important person in my world. If you're not ready for this, we can wait." I looked at my dad's hopeful face, at the way his shoulders seemed less heavy than they'd been in years, and I told him what I thought he needed to hear. "I want you to be happy, Dad. If Jessica makes you happy, then I'm happy too." The wedding was small, held in our backyard, with maybe 30 people. Jessica looked beautiful in her cream-colored dress, and Dad couldn't stop grinning. I wore the pearl necklace Mom had left me and tried to ignore the hollow feeling in my chest as I watched them exchange vows under the oak tree where Mom used to read to me on summer afternoons. The first few months of their marriage seems normal enough. Jessica moved into our house on Maple Street, bringing her modern furniture and abstract paintings that replaced Mom's family photos and watercolor landscapes. She reorganized the kitchen, throwing out Mom's recipe cards because they were cluttered and outdated. She painted the guest room, which had been Mom's craft room, a stark white and turned it into her home office. I told myself these changes were normal. People moving in together had to compromise. But something felt off about the way Jessica's presence seemed to erase every trace of my mother from our home. The real problems started about 4 months after the wedding. Jessica had been dropping hints about family dynamics and moving forward for weeks, but I didn't understand what she meant until she confronted me directly. It was a Tuesday evening in October. Dad was working late again, something that had started happening more frequently since the wedding, though Jessica claimed she encouraged him to focus on growing his business. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when Jessica walked in, still dressed in her sharp business suit from showing houses all day. "Olivia, we need to talk," she said, her voice carrying that artificially sweet tone she used when she wanted something. "Sure," I said, not looking up from spreading peanut butter on my bread. "What's up?" "I've been very patient, but I think it's time we address the elephant in the room." I glanced at her, confused. What elephant? Jessica leaned against the granite countertop she'd insisted on installing, crossing her arms. "Your attitude toward me. Your refusal to accept me as part of this family." "I don't know what you mean," I said, which was partially true. I'd been polite to Jessica, helped her learn where things were in the house, never caused drama about the changes she was making. "You call me Jessica," she said. "You've never once called me Mom or even stepmom. You ignore me when I try to give you advice. You disappear into your room whenever your father isn't around. You're 17 years old, Olivia, and you're acting like a child."
The peanut butter knife felt heavy in my hand. I'm sorry if I've seemed rude. I didn't mean to. Sorry isn't enough anymore, Jessica continued, her voice getting harder. I've tried to be understanding about your attachment to the past, but your father and I are building a new life together, and that means you need to decide whether you want to be part of our future or keep living in the past. My stomach dropped. What are you saying?
Jessica straightened up, smoothing down her blazer. I'm saying it's time for you to choose. Either you accept me as your mother, your only mother now, and start acting like a grateful daughter, or you can make other arrangements for where you're going to live. The words hit me like a physical blow. Other arrangements? You're almost 18. Plenty of kids your age are independent. Maybe it's time you learn to be responsible for yourself instead of expecting your father to take care of a daughter who can't even show basic respect to his wife. I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. Dad would never. He wouldn't choose you over me. Jessica smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. Your father loves me, Olivia. We're married. We're planning a future together. A future that doesn't necessarily include a bitter teenager who refuses to move on from her dead mother. The casual cruelty of those words, dead mother, made my vision blur with tears I refused to let fall. You have until this weekend to decide, Jessica continued. Either you start calling me Mom, following my rules, and showing me the respect I deserve as the woman of this house, or you can pack your things and figure out your own life. Your father will support whatever decision I make. He always does. She turned to leave, then paused at the kitchen doorway. And Olivia, don't think about running to your father with tears and sob stories. He's finally happy again, and I won't let you ruin that for him. I stood frozen in the kitchen long after she left, the half-made sandwich forgotten on the counter. My hands were shaking, and I felt like I couldn't breathe properly. Was this really happening? Was my dad's new wife actually threatening to kick me out of my own home? The worst part was the doubt creeping into my mind. Had I been unfair to Jessica? Had I been living in the past instead of accepting our new family dynamic? Maybe she was right about Dad always supporting her decisions. Maybe I really was just a burden now that he had someone new to focus on. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what to do. I couldn't imagine calling Jessica Mom. The word belonged to someone else, someone irreplaceable. But I also couldn't imagine being kicked out, leaving Dad behind, starting over somewhere else when I was still just a kid myself. The next few days passed in horrible tension. Jessica was coldly polite when Dad was around, acting like the perfect stepmother. But when he left for work, she'd give me these meaningful looks, checking her watch, reminding me that my deadline was approaching. Friday night arrived faster than I wanted it to. Dad came home from work in a good mood, talking about a new client he'd landed and suggesting we order pizza to celebrate. Jessica smiled and agreed, playing the supportive wife perfectly. Actually, she said, glancing at me across the dinner table, I think this is a perfect time for a family discussion. Olivia has something she wants to tell you, don't you, sweetheart? The pizza turned to cardboard in my mouth. Dad looked between us, sensing the tension he'd somehow missed all week. What's going on? He asked. Jessica's smile was sharp as a knife. Go ahead, Olivia. Tell your father about the conversation we had. Tell him about the choice you need to make. My throat felt like sandpaper. Dad's eyes were moving between Jessica and me, confusion written all over his face. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Jessica and I had a disagreement, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. A disagreement? Jessica's laugh was light and airy, completely at odds with the steel in her eyes. Honey, that's quite an understatement. Why don't you tell him the truth about what you said to me? Dad set down his pizza slice. Olivia, what happened? I felt trapped. Jessica was staring at me expectantly, and I knew she was waiting for me to either cave to her demands or force her to paint me as the villain in whatever story she'd prepared. My hands were trembling under the table.
She didn't say anything to you, I said, quietly. She said something to me. Olivia, Jessica's voice carried a warning. She told me I had to choose between calling her mom and accepting her rules or finding somewhere else to live. The words tumbled out in a rush, and the moment they left my mouth, I saw Jessica's expression shift. She looked genuinely surprised that I'd told the truth instead of backing down. Dad went completely still. What? Michael, that's not exactly what happened, Jessica began, but Dad held up his hand. Olivia, repeat what you just said.
A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could both hear it. She said I had until this weekend to either start calling her mom and following her rules or make other living arrangements. She said you would support whatever decision she made because you always do. Dad turned to look at Jessica, and I'd never seen that expression on his face before. Cold, calculating, like he was seeing her for the first time. Jessica, is that true? Michael, you have to understand. I was just trying to... Is that true? Jessica's composure cracked slightly. I was trying to help our family move forward. Olivia has been resistant to accepting me, and I thought maybe some tough love would help her understand that we're a unit now. Tough love? Dad's voice was dangerously quiet. You threatened to kick my daughter out of her home? Our home, Jessica corrected, and I wasn't threatening. I was trying to motivate her to get out. The words were so quiet I almost didn't hear them. Jessica certainly didn't. What? Dad stood up from the table, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I said, get out, right now. Michael, you're being ridiculous. We can talk about this like adults. There's nothing to talk about. Dad's voice was getting louder now, and I could see the anger building behind his eyes. You threatened my child. You tried to force her to choose between having a home and having her memories of her mother. You manipulated both of us. Jessica's mask was slipping completely now. I have been nothing but patient with her attitude. What attitude? Dad exploded. She's been polite to you. She helped you move in. She never complained when you threw out her mother's things. She smiled and played along at our wedding, even though I could see it was killing her. I stared at him in shock. He'd noticed? You want to know what Olivia's been dealing with? Dad continued, his voice shaking with fury. She's been trying to make me happy while grieving the fact that I let someone erase her mother from our house. She's been watching me replace family photos with your modern art, watching you throw out recipes that meant something to her, watching you turn her mother's craft room into your office. Jessica looked genuinely stunned. You said you wanted to move forward. I wanted to heal. There's a difference. Moving forward doesn't mean pretending Sarah never existed. It doesn't mean my daughter has to choose between honoring her mother's memory and having a roof over her head. She's almost 18. She's my daughter. Dad's voice boomed through the house. She will always be my daughter, and this will always be her home, regardless of who I marry. The kitchen fell silent, except for Dad's heavy breathing. Jessica was staring at him like she'd never seen him before. Michael, she said carefully, I think you're overreacting. Family dynamics are complicated, and sometimes kids need clear boundaries. Clear boundaries? Dad laughed, but there was no humor in it. You gave my teenage daughter an ultimatum? You told her she had to call you mom or get out? That's not parenting, Jessica. That's manipulation. I was trying to build a relationship with her. By threatening her? Dad shook his head. By making her choose between her dead mother and you? By telling her I'd always take your side? Jessica's face was flushed now. You do take my side. You married me. You chose me. I chose to love again, Dad said firmly. I didn't choose to replace my daughter or forget my first wife. And I sure as hell didn't give you permission to make that choice for me.
I sat frozen, watching this confrontation unfold. Part of me wanted to disappear, but another part was mesmerized by seeing my dad fight for me so fiercely. "This is exactly what I was talking about," Jessica said, her voice turning cold. "She's manipulating you, playing the victim so you'll choose her over me." "Choose her over you?" Dad stopped pacing and stared at Jessica. "She's my daughter. There is no choice. There never was a choice."
So, what are you saying? Dad was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was calm but final. "I'm saying that if you can't love my daughter, then you can't love me. If you can't make room in your heart for the most important person in my world, then we don't have a future together." Jessica's mouth fell open. "You're choosing her?" "I'm choosing a family, real family, the kind that doesn't make ultimatums or threaten children or try to erase the past. I'm your wife." "You were my wife," Dad's voice was steady now, "but a wife who would threaten my child isn't the woman I thought I married." The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica looked between Dad and me, clearly trying to figure out how this had gone so wrong so fast. "Michael, please," she said, her voice softer now. "We can work through this. I made a mistake, but we can fix it." Dad shook his head. "Some mistakes reveal who someone really is, and what you revealed tonight is that you see my daughter as competition instead of family." "That's not true." "You told her to choose between you and her dead mother's memory. You threatened to kick her out if she didn't fall in line. You assumed I'd support you without question, like I was some puppet you could manipulate." Dad's voice was getting stronger with each word. "You were wrong about all of it." Jessica tried one more time. "I love you, Michael. I love our life together." "You love the idea of our life together," Dad corrected. "But our life includes Olivia. It includes Sarah's memory. It includes the family we were before you came along. If you can't accept that, then you never really loved me at all." I watched Jessica's face cycle through emotions: anger, disbelief, desperation, and finally, cold fury. "Fine," she said, standing up abruptly. "If that's how you want it. But don't come crying to me when you realize what you're giving up. Don't come back when you get tired of being a single parent again." "I won't," Dad said simply. Jessica grabbed her purse from the counter and headed for the door, then turned back one last time. "You'll regret this, Michael. Both of you will." The front door slammed behind her, leaving Dad and me alone in the suddenly quiet kitchen. The silence after Jessica's departure felt deafening. Dad and I sat there staring at each other across the kitchen table, half-eaten pizza growing cold between us. I kept expecting her to come back through the door, kept waiting for Dad to realize what he'd just done and call after her. But he didn't move. "Dad?" I whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly might break whatever spell had given him the courage to stand up for me. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Liv. I'm so incredibly sorry." "For what?" "For not seeing it sooner, for letting her make you feel unwelcome in your own home, for being so caught up in trying to move on that I forgot you were still grieving too." I felt my own tears starting to fall. "I thought you were happy with her." "I thought I was too." Dad rubbed his face with both hands. "But happiness built on hurting you isn't real happiness. It's just selfishness." We sat in the quiet for a while, both of us processing what had just happened. Finally, Dad got up and started clearing the pizza boxes from the table. "What happens now?" I asked. Dad paused, his hands full of plates. "Now? Now we figure out how to be a family again. Just the two of us, like before." "Are you sure? I mean, you loved her." "I loved the idea of her," Dad corrected. "I loved having someone to talk to at the end of the day, and loved not feeling so alone. But I never should have let that need blind me to what was happening to you." That night, after Dad had gone to bed,
I found myself wandering through the house, looking at all the changes Jessica had made. The modern furniture that had replaced Mom's comfortable old couch, the stark white walls where family photos used to hang, the empty spaces where Mom's little decorative touches used to make the house feel like home.
It hit me then how much I'd lost without even realizing it. Not just Mom, but the home she'd created for us. Jessica hadn't just threatened to kick me out tonight, she'd been slowly erasing me from my own life for months. The next morning, Dad was already up when I came downstairs, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop and a cup of coffee. He looked tired but determined. "Morning, sweetheart," he said. "Sleep okay?" "Not really." I poured myself some orange juice and sat across from him. "Dad, are you really okay with this? With her being gone?" He closed his laptop and gave me his full attention. "Honestly, I'm scared. I'm scared of being alone again, scared of messing up as a single parent, scared that maybe I made the wrong choice." My heart sank. "Oh." "But," he continued quickly, "I'm more scared of losing you. And last night, I realized that's exactly what was happening. Jessica wasn't just asking you to accept her, she was asking you to disappear." Dad reached across the table and took my hand. "Liv, I need you to know something. Your mother didn't just give me you. You're the best part of her that lives on. When I look at you, I see her kindness, her strength, her stubborn streak when she believes in something." I smiled through my tears. Mom was stubborn. Incredibly stubborn. And so are you. That's not a bad thing, sweetheart. That's what helped you hold on to who you are, even when Jessica was trying to change you into someone else. We spent that Saturday doing something we hadn't done in months, just hanging out together. We went to the hardware store and bought paint for my room, which Jessica had wanted to redecorate in more mature colors. We stopped by the storage unit where Dad had put some of Mom's things when Jessica moved in. "Why did you keep these?" I asked, running my fingers over Mom's recipe box. "Because throwing them away felt like throwing away pieces of our life with her. But Jessica said keeping them was unhealthy and prevented us from moving forward." Dad made air quotes around Jessica's favorite phrases. I should have known that anyone who wanted to erase your mother from our lives wasn't the right person for our family. That afternoon, we brought Mom's recipe box home, along with some of her photos and a few decorative items that had made our house feel warm and lived in. As we arranged them around the living room, I realized this was the first time in months that our house felt like home again. "Dad," I said, as we hung up a photo of the three of us from my 14th birthday, "I need to tell you something." "What's that?" I was starting to think maybe Jessica was right. Maybe I was being childish, holding on to the past too much. Maybe I should have just called her Mom and tried to fit into the family she wanted. Dad stopped what he was doing and looked at me seriously. "Liv, there's a difference between moving forward and moving on. Moving forward means building a future while honoring your past. Moving on means pretending the past never happened. I don't understand. Your mother will always be your mom, always. No one gets to take that away from you or ask you to give it up for their comfort. A good step-parent would understand that and work with it, not against it." The weekend passed quietly. Dad and I cooked together using one of Mom's old recipes, something we hadn't done since before Jessica. We watched movies on the couch and talked about school, about my plans for college, about normal things that didn't revolve around tiptoeing around someone else's feelings. On Sunday evening, Jessica called. Dad's phone rang during dinner, and I saw her name on the screen. He looked at it for a long moment, then declined the call. "Aren't you going to talk to her?" I asked. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." Dad set his phone aside. "She made her position clear on Friday. She saw you as an obstacle to overcome, not a daughter to love. I don't see how we can come back from that." Jessica called 3 more times that evening. Each time, Dad let it go to voicemail. Monday morning brought a new challenge. Jessica showed up at the house when Dad was getting ready for work. I was eating breakfast when I heard her key in the front door, followed by her voice calling out, "Michael, we need to talk." Dad appeared in the kitchen doorway, his tie half knotted, looking grim. She still has her key. "Michael!" Jessica's heels clicked across the hardwood as she approached. When she reached the kitchen, she looked perfectly put together as always, but I could see the tension around her eyes. Jessica, Dad's voice was carefully neutral. You can't just walk in here anymore. This is my home too, she said, but there was uncertainty in her voice. No, Dad said firmly. It was your home when you were part of this family. That ended Friday night. Jessica's composure cracked slightly. Michael, I came to apologize. I handled things poorly with Olivia, and I want to make it right. How do you plan to do that? Jessica turned to me with what I'm sure she thought was a warm smile. Olivia, I'm sorry if I came across as harsh the other day. I was just trying to help our family blend better, but I see now that I pushed too hard too fast. I looked at Dad, who nodded encouragingly, letting me know this was my call. You didn't push too hard, I said carefully. You threatened to have me kicked out of my home if I didn't call you Mom. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. My voice was stronger now. You said I had to choose between accepting you as my only mother or finding somewhere else to live. You said Dad would support whatever decision you made because he always does. Jessica's fake smile faltered. I was emotional. People say things they don't mean when they're emotional. Do they? I asked, because it sounded like you'd been thinking about it for a while. Dad stepped forward. Jessica, even if we believed that was just an emotional outburst, which I don't, the fact remains that your first instinct when dealing with my daughter was to threaten her. That tells me everything I need to know about how you really feel about her. That's not fair, Michael. I've been trying to build a relationship with her for months. By throwing out her mother's things? By redecorating her mother's spaces? By expecting her to call you Mom after less than a year? Dad's voice was getting firmer. That's not building a relationship, Jessica. That's demanding surrender. The kitchen fell silent. Jessica looked between Dad and me, clearly realizing that her apology wasn't working the way she'd planned. So that's it? She asked finally. You're really choosing her over me? I'm choosing love over control, Dad replied. I'm choosing family over manipulation. I'm choosing the person who's been part of my heart since the day she was born over someone who sees her as competition. Jessica's mask finally fell away completely. Fine, but don't expect me to make this easy for you, Michael. I gave up a lot to marry you. I deserve better than this. You deserve exactly what you gave, Dad said quietly, and what you gave was an ultimatum to a child. After Jessica left, this time leaving her key behind, Dad and I finished our breakfast in companionable silence. As he gathered his things for work, he paused by my chair. You okay, kiddo? I looked around our kitchen, with Mom's recipe box back on the counter and her coffee mug hanging on its old hook, and realized I was better than okay. Yeah, Dad, I think we're going to be just fine. 3 weeks passed before Jessica made her next move, and when she did, it wasn't what either Dad or I expected. I was at school when the call came in. Apparently, Jessica had shown up at Dad's office with divorce papers and a list of demands that made his secretary, Mrs. Henderson, nearly drop her coffee. She waltzed in there like she owned the place, Dad told me that evening over dinner, demanded half of everything, including this house. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. She can't take our house, can she? She can try. Dad's jaw was tight. Colorado is a no-fault divorce state, which means she's entitled to half of what we acquired during the marriage. But this house was mine before we got married, and she lived here for less than a year. The legal battle that followed was uglier than I'd expected. Jessica hired an aggressive lawyer who painted Dad as an unstable father who chose his troubled teenage daughter over his wife's reasonable attempts at discipline. They tried to argue that the house had increased in value during the marriage due to Jessica's improvements, and therefore she deserved compensation. What they hadn't counted on was Mrs. Henderson. Dad's secretary had worked for him for 12 years, since right after Mom got sick. She'd watched our family through Mom's illness, her death, and everything that came after. When Jessica's lawyer started making claims about Dad's character and parenting, Mrs. Henderson quietly gathered evidence to the contrary. I have every email Jessica sent to your father during their marriage, she told us during one of our strategy meetings with Dad's lawyer, including the ones where she complained about Olivia being ungrateful and disrespectful for not calling her mom. Dad looked surprised. You saved those? Mrs. Henderson adjusted her glasses. Michael, I've been watching that girl try to manipulate you for months. I kept records because I had a feeling we'd need them someday. Those emails became crucial evidence. In them, Jessica had written things like, Olivia clearly needs to understand that I'm the woman of this house now, and maybe some time away from home would help her appreciate what we're trying to build here. The most damaging was an email from 2 weeks before our kitchen confrontation where Jessica wrote, I think it's time we considered whether having Olivia live with us full-time is what's best for our marriage. She was planning to get rid of me all along, I said after Dad's lawyer read that email aloud. Looks that way, Dad's lawyer, Mr. Torres, agreed. This shows premeditation. She wasn't just having an emotional outburst when she gave you that ultimatum, she'd been building up to it for weeks. The divorce proceedings dragged on for 2 months. During that time, Jessica tried several different tactics to get back into our lives. First came the guilt trips. Phone calls where she cried about how much she missed our family and how sorry she was for everything. When Dad didn't respond, she switched to anger, leaving voicemails about how ungrateful we both were and how she'd wasted the best year of her life on us. The most disturbing incident happened on a Thursday afternoon in November. I was home alone, working on college applications, when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Jessica standing on our porch with flowers and what looked like a bakery box. Olivia, honey, I know you're in there, she called through the door. I brought your favorite cookies, the chocolate chip ones from Morrison's Bakery. Can we please talk? I didn't answer, but she kept talking anyway. I know you think I was the villain in all this, but I was just trying to help you grow up. Your father can't protect you forever, you know. Someday you'll understand what I was trying to do. She stood there for almost 20 minutes, alternating between sweet pleas and thinly veiled threats about how the real world would treat me if I didn't learn to be more flexible. Finally, she left the flowers and cookies by the door and drove away. When Dad got home and I told him what happened, his face went white. She came here while you were alone? I didn't let her in. That's not the point. Dad was already reaching for his phone. Mr. Torres needs to know about this, and we're getting the locks changed tonight. That incident led to a restraining order that prohibited Jessica from coming to our house or contacting me directly. She violated it twice, once by showing up at my school during lunch, and once by sending a long letter to my guidance counselor claiming she was worried about my emotional stability and thought I needed professional help to process my attachment issues. My guidance counselor, Miss Wright, called Dad immediately. Mr. Richardson, I've never seen anything like this letter, she told him during a conference call I was allowed to listen in on. She's claiming Olivia has been manipulating you and that she's concerned about the girl's mental health. But honestly, Olivia is one of our most well-adjusted students. Her grades have actually improved since the beginning of the school year. It was true. Without the constant tension at home, I'd been sleeping better, focusing better, and feeling more like myself than I had in months. My English teacher even commented that my essays had become more insightful and personal. The restraining order violations cost Jessica dearly in the divorce settlement. Mr. Torres argued that her behavior proved she was unstable and vindictive, and the judge agreed. Instead of getting half of everything, Jessica walked away with her personal belongings, her car, and a small cash settlement that barely covered her legal fees. But the real victory came from an unexpected source. During the final divorce hearing, the judge asked if there were any character witnesses who wanted to speak. I hadn't planned to say anything. Dad and Mr. Torres thought it was better for me to stay out of the courtroom drama. But when Jessica's lawyer painted me as a troubled teenager who had driven a wedge between a loving couple, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Your Honor, I said, standing up in the gallery, may I respond to that? The judge looked surprised, but nodded. You may approach. My legs felt shaky as I walked to the front of the courtroom, but my voice was steady when I spoke. I want to be clear about what happened in my family. Jessica didn't try to be my stepmother. She tried to replace my mother. She threw away things that belonged to my mom, redecorated spaces that held our memories, and demanded that I call her mom, as if my real mother had never existed. I glanced at Jessica, who was staring at her hands. When I couldn't do that, when I couldn't pretend my mom never happened, she gave me an ultimatum. She told me I had to choose between honoring my mother's memory and having a home. She told me my father would support whatever she decided because he always did. The courtroom was completely silent. She was wrong about my father. When he heard what she'd said to me, he didn't hesitate. He chose love over control. He chose family over manipulation. And he showed me that real love doesn't ask you to erase pieces of yourself to make room for someone else. I turned to look at Dad, who had tears in his eyes. My father didn't choose me over Jessica. He chose the kind of family where everyone belongs, where no one has to disappear to make someone else comfortable. Jessica couldn't be part of that kind of family, and that's not our fault. When I finished speaking, the judge was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at Jessica and said, "Mrs. Martinez, I've heard testimony about ultimatums given to a minor child, attempts to contact that child despite court orders, and behavior that suggests you viewed this teenager as competition rather than family. Based on everything I've heard today, I'm approving the petitioner's divorce terms as filed." Jessica's face went red. "This is ridiculous. I'm being punished for trying to create boundaries in my own home." "Mrs. Martinez," the judge interrupted, "the evidence shows that you threatened to remove a child from her home for refusing to call you mom. That's not boundary setting. That's manipulation, and it's precisely the kind of behavior that this court cannot condone." After the hearing, Dad and I stood outside the courthouse in the December cold, both of us trying to process that it was finally over. "I'm proud of you," Dad said. "What you said in there about real love not asking you to erase pieces of yourself, that was beautiful." "I learned it from you," I said. "You could have chosen the easy path. You could have asked me to just go along with what Jessica wanted to keep the peace, but you didn't." Dad wrapped his arm around my shoulders. "Keeping the peace isn't worth anything if you lose your family in the process." As we walked to the car, I realized that Jessica had been wrong about one crucial thing. She'd assumed that Dad's love for her meant he'd sacrifice anyone and anything to keep her happy. But real love doesn't work that way. Real love protects the people who matter most, even when it's difficult. That evening, Dad and I celebrated by ordering Chinese takeout and watching old movies, something we'd done regularly before Jessica, but hadn't done once during the marriage. As we sat on Mom's old couch, sharing lo mein and laughing at a cheesy romantic comedy, it struck me how much lighter our house felt now. "Dad," I said during a quiet moment in the movie, "Yeah? Do you ever regret it, choosing me over her?" Dad muted the TV and turned to look at me. "Liv, I need you to understand something. I didn't choose you over her. I chose honesty over lies. I chose respect over manipulation. I chose the kind of love that builds people up instead of tearing them down." He paused, searching for the right words. "Jessica wanted me to love her by loving you less. That's not how real love works. Real love multiplies. It doesn't divide." Looking back now, I can see that Jessica's ultimatum was the best thing that ever happened to our family. Not because it was easy, the divorce was messy and painful and expensive, but because it forced Dad and me to remember who we really were and what kind of family we wanted to be. We chose to be the kind of family where love doesn't come with conditions, where no one has to disappear to make someone else comfortable, and where the people who matter most will always have a place at the table. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, life had settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. Dad and I had developed our own traditions: Saturday morning pancakes using Mom's recipe, Sunday afternoon walks around Washington Park, and Thursday night movie marathons that often ran way too late for a school night. But the most unexpected change came in the form of Elena Vasquez. Elena was a nurse at Presbyterian Medical Center, the same hospital where Mom had been treated. She'd been Mom's primary nurse during those final weeks, and she'd stayed in touch with Dad afterward, not romantically, just as someone who understood what we'd been through.
She sends a card every year on the anniversary of Mom's death, Dad had mentioned once, months before Jessica ever entered our lives. Just to check in, see how we're doing. It's kindness I didn't expect from someone who barely knew us.
I remembered Elena vaguely, a small woman with gentle hands and a soft voice who always seemed to know exactly what Mom needed before Mom asked for it. She'd been the one to help me understand what was happening when the doctors started using words like palliative care and making her comfortable. Elena had continued sending those anniversary cards even during Dad's marriage to Jessica, though she'd never pushed for more contact. When Dad ran into her at the grocery store in February, 8 months after Jessica was gone, it was the first time they'd seen each other face to face in years. She asked about you, Dad told me over dinner that night, remembering that you were applying to colleges, wanting to know where you'd decided to go. I looked up from my homework, which was spread across the kitchen table. What did you tell her? That you got into Colorado State for journalism, and that I'm incredibly proud of you, Dad smiled. She said she wasn't surprised, said she remembered you writing in a journal during Mom's hospital stays, always asking thoughtful questions about what was happening. The conversation might have ended there, but fate had other plans. 2 weeks later, Elena was working her shift in the ER when Dad came in with me after I'd sprained my ankle during a disastrous attempt at skateboarding. Olivia Richardson? Elena appeared in our exam room with a surprised smile. I thought that name looked familiar. I grinned sheepishly from the hospital bed. Hi, Elena. I am a little older than the last time you saw me. Just a little, she laughed, though apparently not much wiser if you're trying to skateboard at 17. What struck me immediately was how different this felt from Jessica's interactions with medical professionals. Jessica had always treated doctors and nurses like service providers, people whose job it was to accommodate her schedule and preferences. Elena, on the other hand, moved through the hospital like she belonged there, like she was part of a team dedicated to helping people heal. Your ankle's just sprained, she told me after reviewing the x-rays with the doctor, but you'll need to stay off it for a few days. No more skateboarding adventures. I think one adventure was enough, I said, making her laugh. As she wrapped my ankle, Elena and Dad fell into easy conversation about my college plans, his work, and the changes in the neighborhood since we'd all last connected. There was nothing forced about it, no underlying agenda or manipulation. Just two people who'd shared a difficult experience, talking about how life had moved forward. Would you like to get coffee sometime? Dad asked as we were getting ready to leave. I mean, to catch up properly. It's been a long time. Elena paused in her charting, considering. I'd like that, but Michael, I need you to know, I'm not looking to be anyone's rebound or distraction. I've seen too many people make that mistake after losing someone they love. Dad nodded seriously. I understand, and I appreciate the honesty. I think I've learned the difference between healing and hiding. Their first coffee date lasted 4 hours. Elena told me it later, after she and Dad had been seeing each other for a few months, and their relationship had become serious enough that Dad wanted her to be part of our family conversations. Your father spent most of that first coffee talking about you, she said as we sat in our living room one Sunday afternoon. About how proud he was of your strength during his divorce, how you'd handled everything with more grace than most adults would have managed. He talked about you? I asked, surprised. Constantly, about your writing, your college plans, your sense of humor, but also about how guilty he felt for putting you through the situation with Jessica, how he was still learning to trust his own judgment about relationships. Elena's honesty was refreshing. Unlike Jessica, who had pretended to be interested in my life while actually wanting me to change, Elena asked genuine questions and listened to the answers. She wanted to know about my journalism aspirations, not because she had opinions about what I should do differently, but because she was genuinely curious about who I was becoming. I've been thinking, Dad said one evening in May, about 3 months after he and Elena had started dating seriously. Elena and I have been talking about what it would look like for her to be more involved in our family. My stomach tightened involuntarily. The last time Dad had wanted to talk about family changes, it hadn't ended well for anyone. What kind of thing is involved? I asked carefully. The kind where she understands that this is your home, your family, and your decision about how much or how little you want her to be part of your life, Dad said.
The kind where no one expects you to call her anything other than Elena, unless you choose otherwise. The kind where your mother's memory and Elena's presence can coexist, because love isn't a competition.
Elena nodded. Olivia, I want you to know that I'm not here to replace anyone or change anything about your relationship with your dad. I'm here because I care about him, and because I care about you, and because I believe there's room in a family for both honoring the past and building a future. What does that look like practically? I asked. It looks like asking your permission before I move anything in this house, Elena said. It looks like I understand that there are traditions and memories that belong to you and your dad and your mom, and that I'm honored if you choose to share them with me, but I don't have a right to them. It looks like me having my own space here, but not taking over spaces that aren't mine to claim, she continued. It looks like you understand that you're not my daughter, but hoping that maybe someday we can be family in our own way. The difference between Elena's approach and Jessica's was like night and day. Where Jessica had demanded immediate intimacy and authority, Elena offered patience and respect. Where Jessica had tried to erase Mom's presence, Elena acknowledged it as a permanent and important part of our family story. Can I ask you something? I said to Elena during one of our Sunday afternoon conversations. Of course. Why are you willing to do this? To come into a family where you'll always be the second wife, where there are going to be reminders of someone else everywhere? Elena was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. Because real love isn't about being first or only or most important. It's about finding a place where you can contribute something meaningful to people you care about. But doesn't it bother you, knowing that Dad loved someone else first? Your father's love for your mother doesn't diminish his capacity to love me, Elena said gently. If anything, it proves that he knows how to love deeply and faithfully. That's not threatening to me. It's reassuring. She paused, looking at a photo of Mom that Dad had put back on the mantel after Jessica left. I never want to live in a family where love is rationed, where caring about one person means caring less about everyone else. That's not the kind of love that lasts. By the time graduation rolled around in June, Elena had become such a natural part of our family that it was hard to remember what it felt like without her. She came to my graduation ceremony cheering just as loudly as Dad when my name was called. But she also made sure to save seats for Mom's parents, who had driven up from Pueblo to be there. Your mom would be so proud, Elena told me after the ceremony, and somehow it didn't feel strange or inappropriate from her. It felt like someone who genuinely cared about me, acknowledging the people who had shaped who I was becoming. That summer, as I prepared for college and Elena started spending more nights at our house, we had the conversation I'd been dreading since the beginning of their relationship. Elena and I have been talking about getting married, Dad said one evening as we sat on the back porch watching the sunset. My first instinct was panic, but then I looked at Elena's face. There was no smugness there, no sense of victory or conquest, just quiet hope mixed with genuine concern for how I was processing the news. How do you feel about that? I asked her directly. Nervous, she admitted. Happy, but nervous. I love your father, and I love the family we've been building together. But I also know that marriage changes things, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page about what those changes look like. What kinds of changes? Dad leaned forward. The kind where Elena officially becomes part of our family, but you remain the most important person in my world. The kind where we have a wedding that honors what we're building together without forgetting what came before. We've actually been thinking about that, Elena added, about how to have a ceremony that feels authentic to who we are as a family now, including your mother's role in creating the foundation we're building on. It occurred to me then that this was what real love looked like when it was done right. Not someone demanding to replace what came before, but someone wanting to add to it. Not someone threatened by the past,
but someone who understood that the past was part of what made the present possible. I think, I said slowly, that Mom would really like you, Elena. And I think she'd be happy that Dad found someone who sees love as something that grows, instead of something that gets divided up. Elena's eyes filled with tears. That means everything to me, Olivia. Everything. As I sat there between Dad and Elena, watching the Colorado sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I realized that Jessica had been wrong about almost everything. Love wasn't a zero-sum game. Family wasn't about erasing the past to make room for the future. And sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who make space for all the pieces of yourself, even the pieces that came from somewhere else.
That night, I called my best friend Sarah to tell her about Dad and Elena's engagement. "So you're okay with it?" Sarah asked. "More than okay," I said, surprising myself with how true that was. "I'm actually excited. It feels like we're not just getting through anymore. We're actually building something beautiful." And for the first time since Mom died, that felt completely, genuinely true. The wedding planning process revealed everything about the difference between Elena and Jessica. Where Jessica had insisted on an expensive venue and demanded that I wear a specific dress she'd picked out, Elena suggested we have the ceremony in our backyard again, the same place where Dad and Mom had gotten married 20 years earlier. "Are you sure?" Dad asked when Elena brought up the idea. "It might feel strange having it in the same place." "It feels right to me," Elena said. "This house, this yard, it's where your family began. I'm not starting a new family with you, Michael. I'm joining the one that already exists." Even the way she talked about it was different. Jessica had constantly referred to our new life together and our fresh start. Elena talked about adding to what you've built and becoming part of your story. The planning itself became a family project. Elena insisted that I help choose everything from the flowers to the music, not because she wanted me to feel included, but because she genuinely valued my opinions. "You know your dad better than anyone," she told me as we looked at potential menus for the reception. "What kind of celebration would make him happiest?" "Something simple," I said without hesitation. "Dad's not really a fancy party person. He likes good food and people he cares about and music he can actually recognize." Elena laughed. "Perfect. Simple it is." We ended up planning a ceremony for 40 people, mostly family and close friends, with a barbecue reception and a playlist that included Mom and Dad's wedding song alongside Elena's favorite artists. Elena even asked if I wanted to include a small memorial for Mom in the ceremony. "Just something simple," she said, "maybe a candle or a moment of silence. I want to acknowledge that she's part of this family's story and that this celebration doesn't erase her memory." The gesture moved me more than I expected. Jessica had acted like acknowledging Mom's existence would somehow diminish her own importance. Elena understood that honoring Mom actually strengthened the foundation she was joining. 3 weeks before the wedding, we got an unexpected reminder of how different Elena's approach was from Jessica's. I was working my summer job at the local bookstore when my manager told me someone was asking for me at the front counter. It was Jessica. She looked different, thinner, with shorter hair, and an expensive handbag I didn't recognize. But her smile was the same calculated warmth I remembered. "Olivia, you look wonderful, so grown up." I glanced toward the back of the store where my manager was shelving returns but keeping an eye on our conversation. "What are you doing here, Jessica?" "I heard your father's getting remarried. I wanted to congratulate you." The way she said it made my skin crawl. "Okay, thank you." I also wanted to apologize for how things ended between us. I handled the situation poorly, and I've learned a lot about myself since then. I waited, not trusting myself to speak. "The thing is," Jessica continued, "I've been thinking about what you said in court, about real love not asking you to erase pieces of yourself. You were right about that." "Was I?" "Absolutely. And I hope this new woman, Elena, is it? I hope she understands what a special girl you are and doesn't make the same mistakes I did." Everything about this conversation felt wrong. Jessica's tone was too sweet, her interest too forced. I had the distinct feeling I was being maneuvered into something, but I couldn't figure out what. "Is there something specific you wanted, Jessica?" "Actually, yes.
Her smile became more genuine, which somehow made it more unsettling. I wanted to give you this. She handed me an envelope with my name written in her precise handwriting.
What is it? A letter. Just some thoughts I wanted to share about family and second chances and learning from our mistakes. You don't have to read it now. Maybe save it for after the wedding. I took the envelope, mostly because refusing it would have created more drama than accepting it. Olivia, I want you to know that despite everything that happened, I genuinely care about you and your father. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday. She left before I could respond, leaving me standing in the bookstore holding an envelope that felt like it might contain a bomb. That evening, I showed the envelope to Dad and Elena over dinner. She just appeared at your work? Dad's voice was tight with anger. She's not supposed to contact you. The restraining order expired 6 months ago, Elena said quietly. She's technically allowed to approach Olivia now. Dad ran his hands through his hair. What did she want? I told them about the conversation, about Jessica's apologies and compliments, and the strange feeling that she was performing rather than being genuine. Should I read the letter? I asked. Elena and Dad exchanged glances. That's your choice, Elena said. But whatever it says, remember that Jessica has a history of manipulation. If she's reaching out now, right before our wedding, there's probably a reason. I decided to read the letter that night, alone in my room. The contents were exactly what Elena had suspected, a masterpiece of manipulation disguised as reflection and growth. Jessica wrote about how much she'd learned since our family crisis, how she understood now that she'd been too eager to bond with me and had pushed too hard for intimacy. She talked about going to therapy and learning about blended family dynamics and respecting boundaries. But buried in the middle of 3 pages of self-reflection was the real message. I hope your father's new wife understands how lucky she is to join such a special family. I also hope she realizes what a big responsibility it is to help guide a young woman through such important life transitions. College is a time when girls need strong female role models who can help them make good choices about relationships, career paths, and personal values. The letter went on to suggest that Elena might not understand the unique challenges of parenting someone else's child, and offered Jessica's services as a resource if I ever needed advice from someone who had been through this process before. It was manipulation wrapped in concern, an attempt to plant seeds of doubt about Elena while positioning herself as the wise, experienced alternative. Jessica was betting that Elena would struggle with the challenges of being a step-parent, and she wanted to be there when that happened. I brought the letter to Elena the next morning. She's trying to get back into our lives through the back door, I said after Elena finished reading. She's hoping you'll mess up somehow so she can swoop in and be the solution. Elena folded the letter carefully and handed it back to me. What do you want to do about it? Nothing, I said, surprising myself. Jessica spent months trying to convince me that I was the problem in our family. Now she's trying to convince me that you might be the problem. But I've learned something important since then. What's that? The problem was never me, and it's not going to be you. The problem was that Jessica couldn't love Dad without trying to control our family. She couldn't join us without trying to change us. Elena smiled. And you don't think I'm going to do that? I know you're not, because you've had dozens of opportunities to push me to be different, and you haven't taken any of them. You've never once suggested that I should call you Mom, or that Dad should take down Mom's pictures, or that we should change our traditions to accommodate you. Those things belong to you and your dad. They're not mine to change. Exactly. And that's how I know Jessica's letter is just more manipulation. She's assuming you'll eventually want the same control she wanted, and she's positioning herself to be there when you fail at being the perfect stepmother. I tore the letter in half. But you're not going to fail, because you're not trying to replace anyone. You're just trying to love us. The wedding took place on a perfect September morning. Elena wore a simple blue dress and carried wildflowers from our garden. Dad wore his best suit and couldn't stop smiling. I served as Elena's maid of honor, wearing a dress I'd picked out myself, something Mom would have loved. During the ceremony, Elena surprised everyone by including vows directed specifically at me.
Elena, she said, turning to face me after she and Dad had exchanged rings, I want to make you a promise. I promise to love your father without asking him to love you less. I promise to honor your mother's memory and the family she created. I promise to support your dreams and respect your choices, even when they're different from what I might choose.
She paused, her voice thick with emotion. And I promise to remember that being part of your family is a privilege, not a right, and that love is something I have to earn every day through my actions, not something I can demand because of a title. There wasn't a dry eye in the backyard. Even Dad's brother Tom, who never cried at anything, was wiping his face with his napkin. During the reception, as Elena and Dad danced to their first song as husband and wife, I found myself thinking about Jessica's letter. She'd been so certain that Elena would struggle with the challenges of joining our family, so confident that being a step-parent was an impossible task that would eventually drive Elena away. But as I watched Elena laugh at something Dad whispered in her ear, as I saw how naturally she interacted with my grandparents, and how genuinely she seemed to enjoy our family's chaotic sense of humor, I realized Jessica had fundamentally misunderstood what the challenge actually was. The challenge wasn't learning to parent someone else's child or navigate complex family dynamics. The challenge was being secure enough in yourself to love people without needing to control them. It was being confident enough in your own worth that you didn't need to diminish anyone else's importance to feel valuable. Jessica had failed that challenge spectacularly. Elena was passing it with flying colors. Later that evening, after most of the guests had gone home and Elena was helping clean up the backyard, she found me sitting on the porch steps looking at old family photos. "What you thinking about?" she asked, settling down beside me. "Just how different everything is now. 2 years ago, I thought our family was broken forever. Now look at us." Elena glanced at the photos in my lap, pictures of Mom and Dad and me from various holidays and birthdays over the years. "Your family was never broken," she said quietly. "It was wounded, and it was incomplete, but it was never broken. Love like what your parents had doesn't just disappear when someone dies. It becomes part of the foundation that everything else gets built on." She pointed to a photo of Mom teaching me to bake cookies in our kitchen. "That love is still here. It's in the way your dad looks at you when you accomplish something. It's in the recipes you use and the traditions you keep. It's in the way you learned to stand up for yourself when someone tried to make you choose between honoring your past and having a future." I leaned against Elena's shoulder, feeling grateful and peaceful and hopeful all at once. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" "For understanding that loving us didn't mean changing us, for proving that Jessica was wrong about everything." Elena wrapped her arm around me. "Jessica wasn't wrong about everything, sweetheart. She was right about one thing. Being part of this family is incredibly special. She just didn't understand that the reason it's special is because it's built on the kind of love that makes room for everyone." As we sat there on the porch, surrounded by the remnants of a perfect wedding day, I realized that this was what winning looked like. Not defeating Jessica in court or proving her wrong about our family's future. Winning looked like this. Like peace and love and the absolute certainty that some families are strong enough to grow without losing the things that made them beautiful in the first place. 5 years have passed since that September wedding, and I'm writing this from my apartment in downtown Denver, where I work as a staff writer for Colorado Monthly magazine. It's been 3 years since I graduated from Colorado State, 2 years since I started dating my boyfriend Marcus, and 6 months since Elena and Dad told me I'm going to be a big sister. The pregnancy announcement came during Sunday dinner at the house, a tradition we'd maintained even after I moved out for college. Elena was glowing as she handed me an ultrasound photo, her hands shaking slightly with excitement. "We wanted you to be the first to know," Dad said, watching my face carefully for my reaction. I stared at the grainy black and white image, trying to process what this meant for our family. A baby. A half-sibling who would grow up in the house where I'd been raised, with Elena as their mother and no memory of the complicated history that had brought us all together.
"Are you okay with this?" Elena asked quietly. "I know it changes things." I looked up at both of them. Dad nervous but hopeful, Elena radiating joy, but clearly worried about my feelings, and realized that this was exactly the kind of moment that would have terrified Jessica. A moment where someone else's happiness might require emotional generosity from me. "I'm more than okay," I said, meaning it completely. "I'm thrilled. This baby is going to be so lucky to have you two as parents." Elena burst into tears. Pregnancy hormones, she claimed later, and Dad's smile was brighter than I'd seen it in years. That evening, as I drove back to my apartment, I found myself thinking about how different this felt from the anxiety I'd experienced when Dad first started dating Elena. Back then, every change had felt like a threat to the family Mom had built. Now, this new addition felt like a natural expansion of the love that had already proven itself strong enough to weather anything.
The baby, my brother, as it turned out, was born on a snowy February morning. Dad called me at 6 a.m. from the hospital, his voice thick with emotion and exhaustion. "He's here, Liv. 8 pounds, 2 ounces. Perfect in every way." I arrived at the hospital an hour later to find Elena propped up in bed looking tired but radiant, with a tiny bundle wrapped in blue blankets in her arms. Dad was sitting beside her, still in the clothes he'd worn to the hospital the night before, staring at his son like he couldn't quite believe he was real. "Olivia," Elena said when she saw me in the doorway, "come meet your brother." I approached the bed carefully, still processing the surreal reality that I was suddenly a big sister at 22. The baby was impossibly small, with dark hair and Elena's nose, and Dad's stubborn chin. "What's his name?" I asked. "David," Dad said. "David Michael Richardson. We named him after your grandfather." I felt tears prick at my eyes. Grandpa David had been Mom's father, the man who taught me to fish and told terrible jokes and died when I was 14. Naming the baby after him was Elena's way of weaving our family's past into its future. "Can I hold him?" I asked. Elena carefully transferred little David into my arms. He was warm and solid and perfect, and as I looked down at his sleeping face, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just Dad and Elena's baby. This was my family, my brother, my responsibility to love and protect. "Hi, David," I whispered. "I'm your big sister. I have so many things to teach you." Over the next few months, as I adjusted to being an aunt-sister to a newborn, I started receiving messages that reminded me Jessica still existed in the world. They came through social media, friend requests and messages that I never responded to, but that showed up consistently enough to feel deliberate. The messages started innocently. Congratulations on my college graduation, comments about articles I'd written for the magazine, likes on family photos I posted. But gradually, they became more personal. "I see your father had another baby," read one message. "That must be complicated for you. If you ever want to talk to someone who understands blended families, I'm here." Another, "I hope your stepmother appreciates what a special young woman you've become. Not everyone would handle a new baby in the family with such grace." And finally, "I know I made mistakes when I was part of your family, but I learned so much from that experience. I'm actually working as a family counselor now, helping other stepmothers navigate the challenges I faced. I'd love to tell you about the work I'm doing." I showed the messages to Marcus, who read them with increasing incredulity. "She's still trying to manipulate you," he said after reading the last one. "She's positioning herself as the expert on your family dynamics and hinting that Elena might not appreciate you properly." "I know," I said. "The question is what to do about it." I'd never told Marcus the full story of Jessica's time in our lives, just the basics about Dad's difficult second marriage and messy divorce. But the messages prompted me to share the details, and by the time I finished, Marcus was staring at me with a mixture of admiration and anger. "She threatened to kick you out if you didn't call her Mom?" Among other things. "And now she's a family counselor?" "Apparently." Marcus shook his head. "The irony is incredible. She's probably telling other stepmothers to do exactly what she did, demand immediate intimacy and authority instead of earning it." That conversation gave me the clarity I needed.
I drafted a response to Jessica's latest message. Jessica, I appreciate your interest in my family, but I need you to stop contacting me. Your messages seem designed to create doubt about my relationship with Elena, just like your letter before her wedding. Elena has been nothing but loving and respectful to me and my family for 6 years. She doesn't need advice from someone who tried to force a teenager to choose between her dead mother's memory and having a home. Please respect my boundaries and don't contact me again. I sent it before I could second-guess myself, then blocked Jessica on all social media platforms. 2 weeks later, Alina mentioned that she'd received a LinkedIn message from someone claiming to be researching successful blended family strategies and asking if she'd be willing to be interviewed about her experience as a stepmother. The message was from Jessica Martinez, Elena said. I recognize the name from your stories.
My stomach dropped. What did you say? Nothing yet. I wanted to talk to you and your dad first. Elena paused. But I have to admit, part of me is curious about what she wants. She wants back in, I said immediately. She's been messaging me for months, trying to plant seeds of doubt about our family. Now she's coming directly to you. Dad, who had been listening while feeding David his bottle, looked up sharply. She's been contacting you? I told them about the months of messages, about Jessica's attempts to position herself as an expert who could help Elena navigate the challenges of our family. The thing is, I said, Jessica assumes that what happened with her will eventually happen with you, Elena. She thinks you'll get tired of dealing with me, or frustrated with Dad's divided attention, or overwhelmed by trying to blend our families. So she's positioning herself to swoop in when I fail, Elena said, understanding immediately. Exactly. And the fact that you haven't failed, that our family has actually gotten stronger and happier, threatens her entire narrative about what went wrong. Elena was quiet for a moment, considering. What if I responded to her message? Elena, no, Dad said immediately. Hear me out. What if I responded and told her exactly how our family actually works? What if I explained that the challenges she's assuming I'm facing don't exist because I never tried to replace anyone or control anyone? I could see where Elena was going with this, and part of me loved the idea. You want to tell her that loving our family isn't actually that hard when you do it right. Exactly. Maybe hearing from someone who succeeded where she failed will help her understand that the problem was never your family dynamics. The problem was her approach. Dad looked skeptical. Or it could just give her more ammunition to cause trouble. What trouble can she cause? Elena asked. Olivia's an adult with her own life. You and I are happily married with a baby. Our family is strong and stable and built on mutual respect. Jessica has no power over us unless we give it to her. In the end, Elena sent a brief, professional response to Jessica's LinkedIn message. Thank you for your interest in my experience as a stepmother. I'd be happy to share what I've learned. The key to success in a blended family is understanding that your role is to add love, not replace it. Children need stepmothers who support their existing relationships, not compete with them. The families that thrive are the ones where everyone has space to be themselves without fear of judgment or ultimatums. I hope this helps with your research. Jessica never responded. As I write this, David is crawling around the living room of my childhood home, babbling happily as Elena follows him around, baby-proofing everything in his path. Dad is in the kitchen making his famous pancakes. The same recipe Mom used, but with Elena's addition of fresh berries from the garden she planted last spring. This morning, David pulled himself up to standing using the coffee table where Mom's recipe box still sits, right next to Elena's nursing books and Dad's accounting journals. Everything coexists peacefully, layers of our family's history creating a foundation strong enough to support whatever comes next. He's going to be walking soon, Elena says, scooping David up before he can grab the lamp cord he's eyeing with determination. Are you ready for that? I ask. Elena looks around the living room, at the photos of Mom and Dad and me mixed in with pictures from her wedding, vacation shots with David, and images of our growing extended family. I'm ready for whatever comes next, she says. That's what real love does. It makes you brave enough to keep growing. Later, as I help clean up breakfast dishes, Dad pulls me aside. I need to tell you something, Liv.
Something I should have said years ago. What? Thank you for giving Elena a chance. For being open to loving someone new without forgetting someone old. For showing me that it was possible to build on what we had instead of starting over. I look at my dad, older now, with gray threading through his hair and laugh lines around his eyes that weren't there during those dark years after Mom died. Thank you for choosing us, I say, for proving that real love doesn't ask people to disappear to make room for someone else. Dad hugs me tightly. That was the easiest choice I ever made. As I drive home that afternoon, David's laughter still echoing in my ears, I think about how wrong Jessica was about everything. She assumed that love was finite, that families could only work when everyone fit into predetermined roles, that step-parents had to demand respect instead of earning it. But our family proved that love actually multiplies when it's done right, that there's room for everyone when no one tries to erase anyone else. Jessica's ultimatum, choose her or me, was designed to tear our family apart. Instead, it revealed who we really were and what we were capable of when we chose love over fear, inclusion over control, and growth over stagnation. Dad's answer had shocked everyone, including Jessica. But 5 years later, surrounded by the family we built from the ashes of that confrontation, his choice seems like the most natural thing in the world. Sometimes, the best thing that can happen to a family is discovering that their love is strong enough to survive someone trying to destroy it. Sometimes, you have to be tested to learn what you're really made of. And sometimes, the people who try to force you to choose between love and loyalty end up teaching you that real love never requires that choice at all. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now, and hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.